Alright, so for this page, the account component, we first need to add this navbar, which is right at the top. Let's do that. Heading back to the same component. Over here inside the account component, we need to import a few things from the material UI library. The first one being the app bar component, which is used to add in the app bar as such. And the other one is the toolbar. So the app bar and the toolbar components are these two components work in conjunction in order to form a navbar as such. The app bar is used to give the look and feel, and the toolbar component is used to align the content in the center. It adds a bit of spacing, or to say some padding on left and right, and even to the top and bottom. So over here, let's import the app bar and the toolbar components as such. And now we will be wrapping the entire thing inside of fragments. So first we need to place in the app bar component, within which we will be placing in the toolbar as such. And inside of it, we need to place in these content, the logo and these two buttons. So well, these are not really buttons. Well, never mind. So over here within the toolbar, we first need to place in the typography component for the logo, as that's what it is, and the text can be shortly. For the variant, we can actually change the size of the text by setting the variant of typography to be, I guess, H6. Let's see. And now next to the typography, but within the toolbar, we need to place in the button component, the button from the material UI library as such. And we need two of them. The first one for the links and the other one for the logout. Now in terms of functionality, the links button is not going to do much, like it's not going to do anything at all. It's just for the purpose of UI. The logout button is obviously going to log out the user. Now that being said, let's see what do we have by far. Perfect. We do have the app bar component with the logo and these two buttons. So we just need to shift them to the right side, and at the same time we need to change the color. So for this, let's head back, and over here we can wrap the button component inside of a box from the same material UI library. So the box component, you can assume it to be the same as a div element, an HTML div element. So on the box, there are certain things which make it special. The first one being that we can use almost all the CSS properties using props. So if I do something like this, the color, which is a CSS property, and set it to be white, is going to reflect the change, but in this case it won't work because these are buttons. We would have to add in a typography in order to see the change. So this is going to be in white, which is kind of not that, it was not required. Anyway, as you can see, we can change the text color, plus we can change the background color. But for the background color specifically, we have to use the BG color prop. Other than this, all the CSS properties are the same. Like we can change it to be red, as you can see. Now one more thing, the reason why I said that you can use almost all the CSS properties, because there are certain which you cannot, such as the cursor. You can use this property as a prop, but you can always look for the properties which are available by typing in the same thing. Like for instance, if we type in text align, if you see the suggestion, it means that it is something which you can pass. Anyway, that's all for the box. The other thing is you can also use the spacing props. So the library over here, the spacing props are the margin and the margin and padding. So you can use them by using the M or P. Plus you can append the side as such. Like for instance, let me just zoom in. If you want to add margin to the top, you can use MT for margin top. if you want to add margin in the x-axis, left and right, in that case you can use mx. And the same thing goes with the padding, pt, px, the same thing. So now as we want to shift these buttons on the right side, right over here, we can pass in ml, margin to the left, and set the value to be auto. If we do that, there we have the buttons. Perfect. So now in order to change the color of the buttons, what we can do is, on the button component, there is a prop with the name of color. So let me just open the documentation first. If we scroll at the very bottom, we will find the API, which consists of the links to the pages where you will find all the different props which are available. So over here we have the color prop available. So if we set it to be of inherit, it's going to use the color white, as that might be the color which is within the scope. So over here we can pass in the color and set it to be of inherit as such on the button component. If we do that, as you can see, we have the same color. Perfect. So this completes the app bar component that we have over here. Don't worry about the color just yet. We will be fixing that once we implement a theme. We are going to create a custom theme for this application. Anyway, let's continue. Now we need to work on this part that we have over here. So for this, second, let's head back over inside the account component right over here. And in order to keep this page, this screen lean, in order to have a lean structure, I will be shifting this entire part into a component of its own. So for that, within the account directory, let's create a new file with the name of navbar as such, and we are just going to shift this entire thing into this component. So over here, let's create a functional component, and we can return back the same thing, making sure that we import all the components which are being used. So we have the toolbar, we have the app bar, which is not being imported. Let me just do that manually. We have the typography. I think I have to do it manually. Let me just do that real quick. Typography and the button plus the box. So now within the account component, we can just place in the navbar in such a way just to have a lean structure, but we also have to import it first. Let's see, we should be having the same thing. Perfect. So now let's continue, and now we need to add in these content. So the first thing that you will see is that this content is aligned in the center. It's not taking the same amount of space as of the navbar, as you can see over here. So in order to have something like this, in order to have a structure like this, we will be using another component from the material UI library, which is the grid component. And we are going to import it within the account page, the account screen. So over here, right below the navbar component, we need to place in the grid component. Now the thing is that the grid component is used to implement a grid system. Where is it? I can't find the component over here. So the grid component is used to implement a grid system, and we will be using it in order to structure the layout. So there are two types of grid components. There are containers and there are items. So in this case, we first need to place in a grid container, which will be wrapping just one grid item, just a single one, which is going to wrap the entire content, the entire thing that we have over here. Now the reason why we are just adding a single grid item and why we are using the grid component at the first place is because we want to align this grid item in the center, and we want to impose some sort of constraint in terms of the size. So over here on this grid item, just for the time being, in order to actually visualize what we are actually doing, I will be placing in a box component over here. Why does the manual import doesn't work? Just place it as such. I will be placing in a box component with a text of, doesn't matter. So let's just place in the BG color with the color value of red, so that it has the background color. And on the grid item, we can specify the columns. So the thing is, when we add a grid container, it takes the entire space. It stretches out to the entire available space. Then on the grid item, we have few columns. So the grid container not only takes the entire space, but it also divides it into 12 equal columns, which can then be occupied by the grid items within that container. So as we are just adding in a single grid item, this one can occupy those columns. And as we do not want it to stretch out to the entire space, we can specify few less columns. So over here we can do that. So the other thing is that the grid component, the item, we first need to specify a breakpoint. Now breakpoints are the same as media, as you can say, device caps. So there are few breakpoints which are available by default, which are these. We have the XS, which is the extra small, extra small, medium, large, and extra large. And we can look up the default theme. By the way, we will be getting into this later. What it essentially means is these are all theme configuration variables. These are kind of like the ecosystem of the entire application. Any component from the library or any sort of functionality or anything from the library, it has something to do with these theme configuration variables. So within this, we will find the breakpoints within which we have the values. So you will see all the 5 breakpoints over here. So in case you have worked with any sort of HTML or CSS framework, for example, Bootstrap, Tailwind CSS, Semantic UI, or any of the frameworks out there, they all work the same way. It's kind of the same thing. So we first need to specify a breakpoint. The XS that we have over here, it has a value of 0, which means that it's going to target the devices from 0 pixels to the next till the next breakpoint, which in this case is small. So it's going to target from 0 to 600 pixels. The small one will target from 600 to 960, and the same pattern follows down the tree. The XL that we have over here is going to target from 920 pixels to all of the above. Now that being said, over here we will be specifying the XS breakpoint, the smallest one, because when we specify any number of column to any breakpoint, the same value will propagate to all the other breakpoints unless you specify something else. So if we specify any number of column, like for instance, if we specify 8 on the XS, and now if we take a look, we will be seeing the same thing. 1 second. We cannot really see the content, although it's there. And the reason why we cannot see it, because the app bar component, or to say the nav bar that we have over here, is kind of above the content. So if I select it using the div tool and if I delete it, there we have the content. Now the reason why this is happening is because the app bar component that we are using over here, this app bar, it has a position of, where is it? This app bar, it has a position of fixed. So by default, all the HTML elements, they have a position of static, and because it has a position of fixed, it is kind of above the normal flow of elements. So we have to fix this thing, and in order to fix this, the app bar component, it takes a prop of position, and as you can see, the default is fixed, and we can set it back to be of static so that it's back to the normal flow of elements. So over here, On the app bar inside the navbar component, we can pass in position and set it to be of static. If we do that, now we have the content. But we also have one other thing, another issue, which is that now the content, so the app bar component, it has some spacing. Now it might not be the case for your system, like for your project, depending upon the display size. But in order to fix this, we just need to set the very default margin on the browser. We need to set the margin to be of 0. As you will see that the body element, it has a margin of 8 pixels. So in order to fix this, let's head to we can actually go to the index.html, the HTML file which is being used. And over here, let me just quickly change the title to be shorten your links. And over here within the head, I will be adding in the style tag and setting the margin, not like this, the margin to be, one second, well, what am I doing? It's not margin, it's body, to have the margin of 0. And even, well, just the margin, let's keep the margin. And if we do that, now it should be fixed. As you can see, you may have to refresh in order for it to work, but as you can see, it has been fixed, so that's perfect. So the other thing is getting back to where we were, adding the grid component and the item. As you can see that this grid item, which has the box, it's not taking the entire space, it's just limited right over here, as you can see. So it means that we have imposed the constraint of columns right over here, which is perfect. Now we just need to add some spacing. Well, not exactly spacing, we just want this grid item, the one that we have over here, this one, we want this grid item to be placed in the center, like to be placed in the center in the horizontal axis. So for that, the grid container, it takes the entire space, plus it has a display of flex, which means that all the direct children are flex items, and we can align them by using the props which are available on the grid container. One of the props is justify as well as such. So justify is the same thing as justify content, which is used to align the items in the main axis. And by the way, they will be switching the name to be justify content in the upcoming version, which is version 5 of Material UI. But anyway, right now we have to use this prop, and we can set the value to be center. If we do that, there we have the grid item in the center, and that's looking much better. Now we just need to add some spacing, and for that, what we can do is we can wrap the grid container inside of a box in such a way, and we can add some margin to the top of about 5. Now the thing is, we have to provide a numeric value, and this numeric value is not pixels, it's not in pixels, it's actually a spacing value. So whatever value that we provide will be multiplied by 8 pixels, which is something design system related. I wouldn't get into that, but in case you want to change that value, you can do that by changing it within the theme as such. Where is it? Anyway, you can change it, that's the point. So right now we are adding margin to the top of 40 pixels, as that's what it is, 8 into 5, and there we have the spacing, so that's perfect. Now within this grid item, we need to place in this content the text and the button. Let's do that. Over here we will be wrapping these two inside of their own box component, to which we need to add in the typography with the text of links, and we can change the variant to be H4, I guess. Let's see. Oops. Let me just see. Okay, so we first need to import typography, and one second. Okay, so there we have the links text, which is perfect. Don't worry about the font, because as per the design we are using, I guess, Poppins. Yep. We will be like changing the font for the entire application once we implement the theme, but for now we do have the text, and that is perfect. So now we just need to add in the button right next to it. For that, right next to the typography, we can place in the button component, making sure that we import it right away. And the text has to be create new as such. If we do that, there we have the button. So we need to fix the stylings. So the button component, it comes with few variants. As you can see, we have the contained, which has the background color. Then we have the text, which is actually the default that we are seeing right now. And we also have the outlined, which has these outline. So as per the design, the most like the closest one is the contained, as it has the background color, and we have to use the variant with the value of contained. Let's do that. Over here, let's pass in variant contained, and the color is, I guess, primary, which not primary. We have to pass in the color and set it to be primary. Anyway, we will be updating the primary color within the theme, so it's going to be fixed when we get to that point. Anyway, we have the button, which is perfect. We just need to align these two in the same axis. And for that, on the box component, as I said earlier, that this is same as a div element, we can pass in the CSS properties via props. So we will be changing the display to be of flex, and as the default direction of flex is row, which means that these two will be sitting next to each other. If we do that, perfecto. So now we just need to add some spacing, and for that we can wrap either one of them inside of their own box component. Let's wrap the first one, just so that we can use the margin to the right prop with a value of 3. Let's see. Perfect. So things are getting into shape, which is perfect, and I think that's it for this one.